Today, Brenda, we're going to talk about something that, well, it's a year-round sort of thing, but especially at this time of year, who's responsible for slips and falls? What happens in those cases?
Yeah, it really depends, but most cases it's going to be the owner of the property.
Is that right?
Yeah, in Ontario there's a piece of legislation called the Occupiers Liability Act, and it basically says that you have an obligation to keep your property safe, and if you don't and someone's injured, you're responsible for their injuries.
So that could include just about anything.
It could, yeah. I mean, you have to be negligent.
Yes.
But yeah, there's lots of chances when people are.
How is negligence determined then? I mean, obviously, if I have a sidewalk or a driveway, the edge of my driveway is full of ice and I do nothing about it, I'm being negligent.
Arguably, what negligence means is that you didn't do what a reasonable person in your position would have done.
Right.
So you have to meet the standard of care. And it really depends on the circumstances. I mean, you can't constantly be shoveling, for example.
Right.
But within a reasonable period of time of an ice storm, you should be out there taking off the ice and adding salt.
But not necessarily during the ice storm itself.
Not necessarily. It would depend on the circumstances. It would depend on how long the storm was, all of those things, whether it would have been safe for you to be doing it, whether it would have been reasonable for other people to be out and about, all of those things.
Let's take this weekend, for example, Halloween weekend.
Oh, but yeah, that's a great example.
Because a lot of people have decorations.
Yeah.
They have pumpkins with candles in them.
Sure.
They have, you know, other things that lead up to their house. If someone gets injured stepping on one of those things, how is it determined? What happens?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent point. This weekend, everybody, before the trick-or-treaters go out, should go and look at their walkway, make sure there's no obstacles, make sure there's nothing that's obviously unsafe, tripping hazards, that kind of thing. And because you could be potentially liable in that situation, like if you have cords that you've strung across for your Halloween lights, that would be an easy thing for a child to trip on, especially a child with a mask.
Sure.
And you would expect children to have masks at this time of year.
Right.
So, yeah, absolutely, that's something every homeowner should do.
Like if your steps are a little wonky, you get a loose step or something.
Absolutely.
You might want to fix it up.
And if you can't fix it, you might want to put a pylon or something on it to warn people that it's unsafe.
Yeah, because that could easily happen.
Absolutely. I'm sure it will happen.
Yeah. And these kind of things happen all the time, right? It's not just Halloween or other holidays.
Every season, actually. I mean, there are people who come onto your property all the time, and you're not, you know, if you're at work, you don't even realize that there's people reading meters and there's people delivering mail, flyers. All of those people come onto your property. You're not even there, and it better be safe.
Something bad could happen, and you could be responsible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we see a fair amount of these cases? Are there a lot of you know, negligence sort of based cases?
Yeah, for sure. I have about 120 files at any one time, and almost half of them are slips and falls.
Really?
Yeah. So whether
are most of them ice and that sort of thing?
You'd be surprised. I mean, some of them are, of course, but lots of them are in department stores, at the mall, you know, water on the floor, or ice cream has melted on the floor and it hasn't been cleaned up.
Water on the floor.
Yeah, for sure. You know, you see those pylons in the mall. They've got to put them there, and if they don't and you wipe out and the water's been there for a while, they can be held responsible for that.
I guess you're right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and you got to be careful with what's around your property.
Yeah.
Now, this act you mentioned, what's it called again?
The Occupiers Liability Act.
Do we have access to look at that?
Yeah, absolutely. All Ontario statutes are online. It's e-laws. So if you type in Ontario E-law, it'll come up, and then it's alphabetical. So just go to O and you'd see Occupiers Liability Act.
Right, and you can read the whole thing right there.
Yeah, it's a little dry.
Yeah, well,
but yeah,
good
for
to
sure.
know.
Yeah, absolutely, what your obligations are. I mean, the city also has obligations. Lots of people slip and fall on municipal sidewalks, in potholes, where the sidewalks are uneven, so that's another...
Is there any responsibility on the slippy?
Well, yes, you have to be reasonable. Your case is much worse if you're intoxicated wearing stilettos than if you're wearing Sorel boots and walking carefully.
True.
You know?
True. So all the mitigating factors are just that, right?
Yeah, that's right. But that would go to contributory negligence. It wouldn't mean you wouldn't have a case. It would just mean that your case was potentially reduced by a percentage that you contributed to your accident.
It's so interesting how the law can work for you and against you at the same time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, especially in these cases.
Yeah, slips and falls, liability is never a foregone conclusion. So, you know, finding that somebody's responsible is never a given.
Yeah.
You always have to do a good investigation of the facts.
We're going to go to break, but are these cases mostly decided by a judge?
Judge or judge and jury.
Or judge and jury?
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, most of them settle,
Yeah.
but the ones that go to trial, often there's a jury.
Yeah, and I would guess it's more rare than not to go to trial in these cases.
Fewer than 5% of cases go to trial.
Yeah, people want to settle this out of court.
Absolutely.
Yeah.